It'll convert after the recording.
Okay.
Okay. Welcome to your Cohort 3 virtual coaching session. We're really excited to have you here with us today. We are going to be looking at Module 1.2, the second part of that content. And the purpose of our session today is to support you as a district or charter MTSS coordinator. This session is scheduled to go for about 1 hour. However, we tend to not take that long. And we schedule these sessions the Friday before your district or charter MTSS team meets. The purpose of this session is to prepare you to facilitate that district or charter MTSS team meeting. Just as we did at our previous virtual coaching session, we framed these meetings into 3 sections: before the meeting, during the meeting, and after the meeting. And again, this session is to help to prepare you for your next MTSS team meeting. And the date range for that is between February the 27th and March the 5th. Please note we are recording this session and it will be posted on the MTSS Wiki under the Technical Assistance and Coaching page in the section called Virtual Coordinator Coaching. And really quick, I'll pull that up for us. Also, since we are recording this session, well, why didn't it come up? Since we are recording this session, please make sure and use the chat window to communicate. So we can see that a couple of you have introduced yourself using this chat window really quick. If you hover over the toolbar, you're going to see a couple of different options that appear. If you click on the option that says More, and then click on the word Chat, you should see a Zoom group chat window opens up. And we would love for you to go ahead and take a moment and introduce yourself in that chat window. And also really quick, I'm just going to show us where that virtual coaching page is. I imagine you're probably familiar with it.
No, I wasn't.
So if you just go to the NC MTSS Wiki and you scroll down on the left side until you see Technical Assistance and Coaching, and then you're going to go till you see Coordinator Virtual Coaching. And if you click on that link, it has our previous sessions and then also the dates for our future sessions. And then after this recording is posted, after we've completed this recording, we're going to post it here, and we'll also post it with any handouts that we have used. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into some meat. So the first part of this is really helping you to think about what are all the things that I need to think about before my actual meeting happens. So certainly we need to make sure we've got a place to meet. So make sure that you have a location, the time, and the equipment for your meeting. After you've got all that confirmed, then you definitely want to go ahead and communicate with your team members in terms of things that they need to do to be prepared. So one thing you'll notice throughout the course is that each person has an opportunity to jot down their thinking in a reflection journal. So we certainly encourage people to bring their reflection journal to the meeting. And then we also think it could be a great idea to remind people about some of the things that they would need to have looked at before they come to the meeting. So really quick, I'm just going to scroll down to page 3 in this document to remind us of a few of the pieces of content that people will have covered prior to coming to the meeting. So we're going all the way down here. So really what the work has been focused on is about defining core at the district level or the charter school level, and also district or charter structures for defining core. So what are the things that we as a district or a charter school are going to be doing to help support core instruction across our buildings? Scroll back up in the notes and you will have
Where are they going?
And we're working on getting folks muted, so just give us 1 second. If you just logged in, if you don't mind hitting your mute button, please. Thank you. Okay, so also know that today's virtual coaching session is the second part of the previous recording that we had. And the main goal of this meeting, again, would be to choose the task that you're going to be completing as a team. Also, we've got a couple of key resources that would help team members to be prepared for this meeting. So one of the things that you may be dealing with is that folks haven't prepared for the meeting before they come to the meeting. So one thing we definitely recommend is that you embed some of the resources. You may even want to embed a video or pull up a video from Moodle that you want to be able to have some shared conversation and shared learning around. So if you notice that you're facilitating a meeting and you present an agenda item and there's not a lot of conversation around that, that may be that people actually, for whatever reason, didn't review that material. So we definitely think it's a good idea to structure your agenda so that you're actually facilitating some conversation around some of the key resources and content. So one of those key resources is the steps for district MTSS team or your charter MTSS team to provide structure for defining core support. We're going to talk more about this, but just as a quick reminder, I'm going to click on this link and pull this up. So you probably remember seeing this in Moodle. And let's make it a lot bigger. And really quick, this actually walks through how do we do this work of defining core support. So remember, core support is the academic and behavior, social, emotional instruction, curriculum, and environment that all students and all staff implement within our building. So all students would have access to this and all staff would be empowered to implement this. So there are a couple of steps that we walk you through in terms of defining core support. So step one, really quick, is establishing a shared vision. This will be familiar with you because we actually use this P3 tool in your Module 1 preview when we brought all your team or your teammates together and we were helping you to prepare for the online learning. And really quick, I'm going to show you that because sometimes it makes us feel better to be reminded of these things that we already did. So one of the things that you did with your team is you jotted down your ideas about what a core would look like. What are some general non-negotiables for academic and behavioral instruction? And then what is the district's role in core support? And after you jotted down your own items, you passed your paper to the person beside of you and you circle, underlined, use a highlighter to illustrate some of the key points that were really important. So the second step would be to actually identify the elements of this core support. And you do this through focusing on environment, curriculum, instruction, and you may also include data evaluation. So here on this example, you're going to see each of those buckets with some different examples that are a common conversation in terms of how we define core support. The third step would be that the team identifies broad or specific categories for each of those selected items. So we do connect you. We get a lot of questions around, well, what about documentation and what's your paperwork look like? So we actually have suggestions for what this could look like for core. So if you click on this link, and this is also, should not be the first time you're seeing this. This is also in our Module 1 content, but it's core recommendations for documentation. So we're really moving away from individual student documentation for core, and really thinking about what is it that we're providing across an entire grade level and across an entire school. And we're doing that through looking at each of these different buckets, what we say ICE, instruction, curriculum, and environment. We started with this actually with environment because sometimes that's actually easier for folks to do. So we say start with a quick win. But this gives you some ideas of when we're thinking about documentation, what are the things that we're documenting? So that would be some of the specific recommendations in terms of documentation that you would want to have for all students within a building. So here you actually have an image of what this activity can look like. Any of you that attended the Strengthen Your Core training, this was actually the morning portion of that training. And we walked you through how to facilitate this conversation and getting teams to jot down their ideas on a sticky note. You would place them under whichever area that they go in terms of environment, curriculum, instruction, and data evaluation. And so here you can see some examples. So we know this is really helpful for folks. So when we're thinking about the bucket of environment, some different categories that you might see on sticky notes are here. Same thing, but around curriculum, you may see these types of categories. And around instruction, here are some examples of categories. And here are some examples under data evaluation. And then your fourth step is that you as a team would actually unpack these broad categories and think about who is going to be responsible for this work. Is this the work of our district or charter MTSS team? Is this the work maybe of a school leadership team? And then you would be able to further have some more conversation around the guidance or support that is needed, and starting to address any gaps in terms of our support. So a plan. Also, another resource that would be helpful is, and so your team, you could have chosen the activity of the core observation. And so we provided quite a few examples of classroom walkthroughs, also the idea of an instructional round, or we've got one example here of a tool that is actually focused on explicit instruction. So this is a checklist that was also linked in Moodle. So you may be familiar with this checklist. One of the things that we notice, and as you have a team that is doing this, the great thing is that as you talk about what you saw or didn't see, you're going to further define what this means. So definitely the people that are collecting the information need to be on the same page. And you saw some examples of how folks took some tools and developed rubrics even to help them with making sure that your team members were on the same page in terms of what they saw or they didn't see. So some materials that could be helpful for your team members that you may want to print, or of course you could provide them electronically, you could link them in your agenda, would be your district implementation milestones. So really quick, I just want to remind you of what that looked like. And as we talk today, we're going to make some direct connections to the milestones that are connected with your current work. Also, you may want to refer to the school implementation milestones. And again, remember, these milestone documents are your maps for implementation. And we have heard from many coordinators that they actually have printed these off and they have them hanging up beside of their desk. And as they complete different parts of these milestones, they actually check that off. Also, a great tool that you have access to is the learning checklist. So certainly the portion of this content is focused on the second half of this Module 1.2 learning checklist. And I know actually when I'm doing this work, this is exactly what that I use and check off the different items. And then I think about how that I might really use this when I'm coaching a coordinator or a team. I'm going to scroll down to the part. So the team meeting, this is what we prepared you for the last time we were together for virtual coaching. So the work in terms of this current team, your team would have started here in terms, the first page that you would have accessed was the district's approach to defining core support. And then you can see some of the team steps. And then getting into this team meeting, which is what we're preparing you for right now. And a part of that will be that your team assignment. All right, 2 other little things just to think about before you actually pull folks together would be, one, it is really helpful if you're projecting so that there is a common visual space that your whole team is able to look at. You could certainly also have people be on like an individual computer or laptop, but you may find it especially helpful to have like a projector so that everybody's actually looking at the same thing. And it just helps with attention, and it will certainly help in terms of facilitating. And then the final thing are thinking about those team roles. So we really think that there are 3 roles that really help you to have an effective and efficient team meeting, especially for where we are right now in the design work. One of those is a note taker who would be documenting kind of the key ideas from the meeting and the conversation, and also documenting any action items. It tends to be that you may be the facilitator. I think that's how that we've tended to think about this. Definitely the facilitator would be a part of kind of keeping that conversation moving, presenting the agenda, and then also certainly summarizing things that you hear so that that can be documented in the notes. And then a timekeeper may be another role that you find helpful. And that would just be to make sure that the conversation that we're continuing to move. And sometimes we may have something that comes up that we need to talk about a little bit longer. But that may mean, because we don't have enough time that day, that it actually moves to a future agenda item. And then just to elaborate on that really quick, our team, so this, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Beth Boggs, and I'm one of the MTSS regional consultants, and I support the Northwest region. And I have with me Carmen Mills. Carmen, you want to say hey?
I do. Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here.
And Carmen supports the Southwest region. And I know earlier in our meeting this morning, there was something that we talked about, and actually for us, our team, to be able to talk about it more, the fastest way for that to happen was for a couple of us to take that as the action and work on it and then bring it back to the team. So we certainly believe in divide and conquer. All right, so Carmen's going to lead us through the next portion of the meeting, which is really focusing on what are the things that we're doing during our meeting.
Exactly. So Beth did a really great job of walking us through what to think about prior to the meeting. The other thing that you really want to think about is what thing you're going to do during that meeting. And so as a part of our activities, we give you 3 things that you can choose from. So one of the things that you'll do before or during the meeting is really determine what is it that we'd like for our team to do as a part of our activities. And part of that is really thinking about what's going to drive our work. So in this module, you're doing a lot of support around universal screeners. You're getting a lot of information about that. And so that's what a lot of this information is based on. So the first activity that you could do is describe the process of reviewing universal screening tools. So when you looked at the first part of this section, one of the things it asked you to do is to pick 3. So now what you're going to do is really describe which one of those you picked, and then how you use that. So the first one is just to describe the process of reviewing a universal screening, thinking about, did you evaluate your current universal screener tool? Was the district's use of this tool affirmed, or is the selection of a universal screener a necessary next step? And so what you would do if you select this is really review or reflect on how you chose this universal screening tool. And here are a couple of tools that might help you support that work. One is just that sources document, and Beth is going to go there and show you what that looks like. And this tool is just really a tool that we use to vet our current universal screeners. So if you look here, we've got some websites that kind of help you look at what are those research-based, those validated, those reliable universal screening tools that are already out there. And in addition, what are those monitoring tools that are also available for us to use? So if you aren't really sure what screening tool to select, this might be a great source to start with, just to kind of think about what tools are readily available for us and what have already been deemed reliable and valid measures. In addition to that, you might also want to use the Team Universal Screening Selection tool. Or you might have already used this. These are the things that you should have been using already. And this tool just really helps you think about what are some tools that we've thought about using. You might even think about tools that you already do use. And then you want to ask yourself questions around how effective those tools are. So in thinking about technical adequacy, are they reliable, validated? Do they disaggregate the data efficiently for us? Are we thinking about administration and scoring time? So your team will ask yourself those questions to determine if you've really got the most effective universal screening tool. And based on that conversation, you should be able to come up with one overall universal screening tool to support the needs of your students and your staff. And Beth, please add in anything here that I might miss out on. So the next thing that you could have done is conduct a district-wide assessment inventory. So if you did that, this next question asks you to describe the process of conducting that district-wide assessment inventory. It might ask you to think about if you discovered any redundancies or any gaps. And then what were some of the identified next steps for assessment planning based on your findings? And so as a team, what we asked you to do was think about using the math or the literacy assessment inventory, and we'll show you a copy of those. And this document just asks you to look at what you're currently using. It asks you to think about the grade level. And there's not a space here, but you certainly can write in what that tool is, how it informs your instruction, how it determines who's at risk or why they're at risk, if it also includes a way to monitor growth, or if it helps you determine if we met outcomes. And so this is what we're currently using. And then you might want to ask yourself as a team, what do we need and how will we get there? So if all of our needs aren't being met with what we're currently using, what are some other tools available and how will those things do that as well? And then it'll also help you really think about a plan of action once you've looked at those tools and your current resources. And you have an assessment sheet that looks like that for math. And then you also have a similar sheet for literacy that asks you the same kinds of questions. And again, it's really more for that action planning. So when you're looking at your assessment inventory, you can make sure that you've got all the information that you need. And if not, then what are some additional things that we need to look at for our assessment plan? What are some tools? Are we using the most effective things for our schools and our students? So the last thing that you could have chosen was really just to do a classroom visit and decide on what some basic themes of that observation or your classroom visit was. So as a team, you should have selected a content area or a grade span that focused on, and then scheduled a series of classroom walkthroughs in this area. And what you could have used is any one of the walkthrough tools that we provided, but here's an example. That just kind of shows you one way. And Beth also showed you an additional walkthrough tool when she was providing her instruction as well. But this one just really focuses on skill and strategy, lesson observation. It talks about the show, tell responses, and it's just a way to provide you with information about what should be occurring in the classroom. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Most of you already have a tool that you're using. In addition to this, once you've made that selection, then you're going to lead your team through that. Those tools, and then you also have some additional resources available. And so here is just a list of all the resources that we've kind of already gone over, some in our last meeting, but then some in this meeting as well. And so the first few, like the learning checklist, and we can take a look at it. We can click on it if you like to, Beth. Is Beth has already talked about, and we can use this tool to really focus our work and help us make sure that we've done all the things and all the tasks, and also looked at all the sections of the module that we should have. So we've taken a look at that already. The assessment guidelines is a comprehensive tool. It provides a lot of information about how to really develop an assessment system within an MTSS framework. And then if you look specifically at pages 3 to 6, it speaks to the work that you've been doing in this section of the module. And it helps you to think about, when we're picking assessment tools, especially those universal screeners, are we measuring those things, those items, and those areas that we should be measuring across the grade level span? So in literacy, in math, and in behavior and engagement, do we have tools that are really measuring the things that we want to measure for our students? This document provides a lot of comprehensive information. It's a wealth of knowledge, and information in this document. So it's something that you should definitely think about and consider using with your teams as well. It provides you information about all types of ways to choose the assessment system and just the background behind assessment systems and things like that. The universal screening areas is more, it takes those pages from kind of 3 through 6 and kind of breaks it down in a different way. Again, this is really thinking about, are we measuring the areas that we should be measuring for our grade level span? So in kindergarten, do we have a tool that really measures concepts about print? And in math, early numeracy? And in behavior, do we have a tool that really helps us to think about our office discipline referrals and how much we're monitoring those, and maybe on a consistent basis? So this takes those pages 3 and 6 and kind of puts it into a tool where you can really look at it. The sources document is a tool that we've talked about a little bit earlier, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. But again, this is what you're using with your team. If you haven't selected a universal screener, and even if you have and you want to make sure that this is valid and vetted and it's reliable, this is the tool that you might use. There's the links that you might use to kind of make sure that that's happening. And so we provide you with some websites that look at screening and monitoring. The team universal selection tool we've talked about already, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. Again, that's just that tool that you would use to kind of help your team decide. The assessment inventory, we've also looked at that. So this just gives you 2 places where you can gather those materials and those resources for your teams. The explicit instruction checklist is not one that we talked about earlier, but here's another way that we could provide observations within the classroom, just another observation tool. And Beth did actually show this one a little bit earlier in our discussion. So it's something to think about if you're going into classrooms and taking a look at that instruction that's going on. This might be a tool that you would think about using. Another example of just an instructional rubric from Brunswick County that allows you to see, it's like that classroom walkthrough as well. So again, it's just those tools that support that if that's what you chose as part of your assignment and for your meeting. Thanks, Beth, for going through all of these. So Beth went through this extensively in her conversation. So again, it's just the steps for your district MTSS team to provide structure for defining core support, and it provides you with all the essential steps as well as tools and resources that you might need, and some examples of how other schools have provided or developed that core support. Beth mentioned earlier that one of our tools that we always ask teams to focus on is really thinking about those district and those school MTSS milestones. She mentioned that this is something that you could post in your office just to ensure that you're on the right track when we're thinking about implementation of MTSS. So it's really that guidance MTSS implementation tool. And so as we're thinking about this particular section of the module, if you go to page 3, or 4, Beth, if we kind of scroll down and if you make that just a little bit bigger, you'll see that some of the work that we've done in this section is related to some of these, which is things like, does our district team conduct an assessment inventory? Are we eliminating unneeded assessments in district-wide sources, or are there district-wide sources that are still needed? So in terms of thinking about making those connections, you want to think about the things that you're doing and connecting them to the module work as well, and the milestones tool is a really great way to do that. The other thing that connects here is just that we are using regular intervals to examine district-wide data and to determine the effectiveness of our core. So there are some connections here that can be made with those milestone documents, especially here at the district level. There aren't as many that connect specifically at the school level, but we certainly want to make sure that we're using this tool as we are working with schools as well to think about their assessment systems. So this one is really looking at, does the school leadership plan and use student outcomes? So this is about our assessment inventory. So this is the question on the school version of this that does actually relate to the work that you've done in this module. And then also whether you are looking at if your school leadership team defines and plans support for essential elements of core. So do we review and identify best practices in literacy, math, and behavior? And then also, do we develop a plan to gather, collect, and think about our current core instruction, the curriculum, and the practices that we use for reading, math, and behavior? So just a way to tie in those milestones to the work that you're currently doing. So after the activity that you've chosen, you want to ensure that the following, that you know who is going to do what for that task. So again, it's thinking about that team effort and how we're going to get the task done, by when the task will be completed by each of the team members. What will it look like when the task is completed? So if you're using one of the resources or tools, how are we going to use that? But if we're not, what is it that we are going to use, and what will that look like when we finish? And then you want to be prepared to post the results of the assignment at the next meeting during the week of February 27th through March 5th, which is when you should have completed this module. So, and then you want to ask yourself, what questions does the team have about the content so far? Do they need any assistance with any of the content? And make sure that there's no additional questions out there for your team members. Of course, if you ever get a question that you're not completely sure about, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or Beth or any one of your regional consultants to make sure that you have the information that you need. And then I think Beth was going to talk about the reviewing the, so other things just to kind of think about is defining the core at the district level. You want to review the expectations so far that you've already gotten from the comments. So defining the core and district structures for defining the core are going to be important work. What you'll see coming up in the content is really thinking about how we're problem solving around that core, and then analyzing information that we receive in terms of those assessments. So how are we analyzing the core? How do we know that it's effective? And you're going to want to get informal feedback from your district or charter MTSS team about some of those things. Some of the resources that you may want to use would be just thinking about a feedback survey, Glow and Grow exit tickets. Again, you want to get as much feedback as you can from your team, one about the process, one about information that they might also need. And you also want to get information about thinking about, was this meeting a good use of our time? Are the meeting steps really clear? Has this been an effective way to learn the material that you wanted to learn? And then after, you're going to want to review that feedback. You're going to want to email all these action items to your team, communicate both celebrations and any changes for the next meeting during that in your communication. And you're going to want to ensure that the next meeting is scheduled between June 19th and July 2nd, which is when the next assignment is due and the next module should be completed. Beth, was there anything that I left out or anything that I should have shared in that as well?
No, you did a fantastic job, Carmen. And so just so that you all know, there was one question about accessing the document. So this will be posted in the coordinator virtual coaching section on the wiki. But also I did go ahead and just drop the link in the chat window. And it's looking like some of you found it very quickly and are in there. So fantastic work. So you'll have access to this both today through clicking on the link in the chat window. Your other way to access this after we finish the session is to go through the NCMTSS Wiki, scroll down to Technical Assistance and Coaching, click on Coordinator Virtual Coaching, and then you're going to see both the recording and a link to this resource, so you have access to that. And Carmen, I'm thinking what we could do, we'll go ahead and stop the recording, and then we would love to give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you have.
Okay.